Hi, welcome to Sleeknote. I'm Peter, a customer success manager here. I'm joined by Emil, our CMO. We have just started a new trial, and today we'll go through the most asked questions and do a general demo of the tool.
And I'm just going to play that I'm a customer and ask the questions that we would normally get when you have an introduction like this and a demo call. And we'll also have some best practice. So follow along and let's go.
Yeah, so switch to the screen here. Once you've started your trial, you'll be put into the editor. Here we start by defining the domain that we wish to use a Sleeknote on. In this case here, I'm just going to go with sleeknote.com, which is our domain. You can run several domains from the same account, so this is where you would differentiate. The next step here is to choose what we would like to do with the given Sleeknote. Now, collect email address and create contact are fairly similar in that they provide you with information from the user. Promotion Sleeknotes are the other way around, so you can give information to the user. The editor for all three is essentially the same, so there's no difference in how you design them. The requirements for each are a bit different though. For instance, with collect email address, you need to have an email address field. That's sort of implied in the name. But given that, you have additional options when it comes to integrations, such as MailChimp or Campaign Monitor and so on, because they rely on having that email address. Create Contact would be more suited for asking for a name or phone number, doing a small survey, but in turn, you wouldn't be able to integrate with as many services.
Nice. Let's
go with the collect email option here today. That way you get to see most of the tool. We get into the template selector here. We have a fair variety of already pre-themed templates available here, as well as some blank ones here at the bottom where you simply start from scratch yourself and do your own design. If you have a design in mind, this is a great place to start, but feel free to let yourself be inspired here or just customize any of our pre-existing templates to suit your website. The only one here that sticks a bit out is the Sleek bar. That is different than the rest of the Sleek boxes here in that it will be either on the top or bottom of your screen as a bar and stretch across the entire screen. The Sleek boxes instead here are placed either in the center of the screen or in either of the corners. Other than determining the position here, or where on the screen it appears, the position also affects the behavior of the note. So if we go with the center position, the note will put a cover on your website so that you have to interact with it in one way or another. This means the customer has to fill it out or they have to close it in order to get back to the site. If you go with the bottom positions, the note will be displayed on top of the site, but the user can still scroll, they can still click on the website, and they don't have to interact with the Sleeknote if they don't want to.
What is best practice regarding the different positions? Now, let's say I'm running a competition about a gift card and I want as many signups as possible since I know they're already relevant because they're coming from my site. But my personal opinion is I hate pop-ups, but now I see that there's also the slide-in version. Which one would you recommend? And is there any situation where one of them is better than another?
That definitely is. For newsletter generation in general, I would recommend either of the bottom positions, simply because you're asking for a bit more info and it's a little less intrusive, so to speak, to the user experience. The center position is fantastic for promotion purposes where you want to drive traffic to a specific page of your site. It could be Black Friday, for instance. So you have it show up with here's all our Black Friday offers and a button they click to go there. Or if you're running an exit intent Sleeknote in your checkout flow, then again, having it appear in the center with as short a distance as possible from the menu line here down to the content you're trying to show is ideal. And as they're trying to leave your website anywho, putting the cover on, stealing focus from what they were doing in the background is not really going to hurt anything there.
All right, so let's go with one of the bottom positions.
Sure.
Let me see the editor.
Do bottom right here. When we get into the editor here, as you can see, we preload the website in the background that has been entered, in this case, sleeknote.com. This is so that you can see how the node would look on your site in terms of colors and fonts. The sizing here is, of course, not entirely accurate, as it depends on how big of a screen that you're on. As you can see, I'm on a laptop here, so the node takes up a fair bit amount of space. But when it comes to editing the Sleeknote here, it's really simple. You can click on any element to edit it. In this case here, I could say, well, I actually want to offer $30 off instead of 20. I then click save, and that's that. If we take one of the input fields, you get a bit more information and options here on the right in terms both of styling, but also on the settings. For instance, here, the name field is not required by default. If this is something that I need from my customers, I can mark it as being required here. And if the customer has then not filled it out before they press sign me up, it will simply say to the customer that they have to do this in order to proceed. So if you are segmenting your newsletter, this is a fantastic option to have. And moving stuff around in here is simply done by drag and drop. So let's say I wanted email address to appear before name. I simply put it above here. You can see these yellow anchors everywhere that you can drop an element. They appear on every edge of the other existing elements, so I could potentially also have it appear next to if I wanted to. Let's throw it up here. If I want to add another element, that is done in the exact same fashion as moving it around. I go to add elements here on the right, pick the element that I want. In this case, let's say I want a drop-down menu. Simply drag that in onto a yellow anchor, and the drop-down menu then appears. I could then pose a question here and say, what is your gender? In case I'm selling clothes, it might be pertinent to know if it's male or female. And then in the menu on the right here, scroll down to the options here. I want to say the first setting should be male, and the second one should be female. Now, as you can see, there is both a change text and a change value field. The value field is not going to do much in the Sleeknote itself, but if you integrate with your ESP, so MailChimp or again Campaign Manager or anything else, this is the value that will be sent there. So especially for something like a drop-down menu or radio buttons where the ESP will likely expect a specific value, you can specify that here. So if I know that I also have male and female as the values in my list, I would simply just have it say the same here. But it could just be M or F or whatever you have chosen as values. Now, again, I'm going to mark it as required because it's information that I want in order to segment the newsletter. But I don't want any of the options to be pre-selected. So when I don't have anything pre-selected, this is the text that will appear in the drop-down instead. Gotta save that here. Now, in the editor here, you can see that we have both desktop and mobile editor up here at the top. Now, it's in general a good idea to just always check both, that they appear the way you want them to. Nothing is out of place and the design fits. But it could be that you have something, in this case, for instance, the drop-down here was added below the button on mobile because it arranges them a bit differently. So of course I put this back into place. But let's say that I would like the text up here to be a bit smaller on mobile than it is on desktop. I changed the amount to $30 before. As you can see, that has carried over to mobile. All the elements are linked by default, so any changes made on one platform will carry over to the other one. If I select the text here, I can go up here on the right and click on link. That will then make any style changes I make now only apply to the mobile editor. So I could take this one down to 44 pixels, for instance. It would then take up a little less space here, but it would still be 50 pixel back on the desktop.
So in theory, I could have one Sleek box, but one for desktop and one for mobile.
They could, in theory, be completely different. If you wanted to make something that was radically different on mobile than what it is on desktop, I would instead recommend that you create two different notes and then simply disable each up here. So one is only enabled on desktop, one is only enabled on mobile. Simply because if they are that different from one another, you don't want their data to be mixed together. in terms of what is actually generating your views and leads and so on.
And a side bonus must also be that you are able to A/B split test and so on mobile only and see the results progress, hopefully, on mobile or on desktop.
Exactly, and you have the option of duplicating a Sleeknote. So you could make this one here, disable it on mobile, create a duplicate of it, and then enable that on mobile, disable on desktop, and then make the changes you need to on mobile. So you don't have to start everything over from scratch. Once you duplicate, it'll carry over all your settings in terms of integrations and triggers as well.
If I want to change the image here, or let's say I want to undo something I've done here, what are the actions that I have to change?
Well, as you can see, we have an undo button up here at the top as well as a redo. So if I click that, in this case, it'll undo the last change I did, which was the text edit here. So this one has returned to 50 pixels. It's still unlinked, however. So again, I could relink them. If I do that, it will copy the styling from the platform I'm on onto the other one. So if I relink while on mobile, it's whatever I have done to mobile that is then sent to desktop. In this case, I can just press sure because they will still be the same as they were before.
So a good case there would be if I really, I've really been fighting with it on desktop, and oh shoot, I unlinked it before on mobile and desktop.
Yeah.
Now I can just link it again, get the changes on mobile, and maybe unlink again and change on mobile.
Exactly. Then you can do small adjustments as you go. But if you do major changes, relinking, copying over all your styling and text, and then doing small edits is a fantastic way to go. In terms of the image, now, and it's a good question here because I added the drop down here, you can see in the bottom, currently the image is not large enough to actually cover the entire background of the Sleeknote. So we would have to remedy that somehow. There are several ways to do images. You can either put them in as an element, where they would be placed in line with all the other elements here. That's not what we want in this case. In this case, it's a background image. You can see when I hover over here, I have two containers, as we call them, where all the elements are placed inside. You can use an image as a background on each container. In the case here, we have an image that actually crosses both containers. So what we've done is we go into layout here, then we have the one called Sleeknote form, which is the basic canvas, so to speak, the bottom layer of the entire node. As you can see, when I select that, it puts a border around the entire thing, and I then have the background image here. Now, the image I have here is not larger than this. If I could, have scaled it down, but in this case, this is the size of the image. So I would want to upload a new one here that actually were big enough to fit. What I can do here is also just say, well, I want to add some background color. Okay, so if I go with white, as you can see, then it'll simply add white color below. So if my picture were an object on a white background, I could still have a picture that was smaller than the Sleeknote and just fill out the rest of the color to match the picture. In this case, where it's a gradient color on the image, it's not going to work that well. Adding a color here, you would always be able to tell the difference.
Let's say I delete the drop down. If we can delete that, and then I want to change the call to action to be my brand colors.
Sure. So I picked the drop down here. There are two ways of deleting it, either simply by hovering over it and then selecting the crosshair, or if I click it and scroll down, I have a delete element as well. So it'll just ask me if I'm sure. I am, and you can see the note now returns with the picture filling the whole background, so that's all good. The call to action button, if I click on that, you can see I get several options here on the right again. The color can be set either simply by selecting anything here in the wheel, or if you know your brand's hex color, you can of course grab that. In our case, for instance, let's say we wanted this to have the Sleeknote color that appears here on our website. I could just have a color picker like the one I have here, hover over our logo, grab the color, and paste it in here, and the button will then be Sleeknote color. Same way, you can change the color on the text by marking it, pressing text color here, picking one of the colors we have, or actually entering in a hex color yourself as well.
Nice.
So a fairly unlimited amount of options you can do here.
Let's try and move forward to the next step.
Sure. If we go to the teaser here, this will appear whenever the form is not open. If you choose to have it on, that is, it is optional on the desktop version. You can see here on the right, I have the option to hide the teaser. I would highly recommend leaving it on if you're doing, again, newsletter generation here, simply because some users will either close the note when it appears by reflex, as this is a slide-in and not a pop-up that covers the entire screen. They could, change page while it's open, and it will then, of course, disappear. This way, they have a chance to reopen it and sign up. So if you simply put your CTA down here, and in this case, I had changed it to $30, which I, of course, will do here again, then the user can just open it and sign up whenever they want.
Let's say I want people to be able to close the teaser as well.
Sure. Then you go to add elements, just like with the form. Pick the close button, drag it in here. As you can see, it becomes yellow again. And then we have a small close button here. The close button is an image. So if you have another close button that you use on your site and you would like the design to carry over, you can simply just upload your own button and then adjust it in size with the slider here. In this case, I like this one. I'll just leave it on. And again, I could grab it and move it around if I wanted in the other side, but having it all the way up to the edge of the website might not be optimal. This way, it's a little more clear to the user that they can actually close it. Mm-hmm. In the same way, you can add images, and especially floating images are fantastic to use on the teaser here. So you could take the text, move it to one side, insert an image over here that would actually stick out of the teaser a little bit. I don't. Let's see if I have anything we can use. So we could grab a floating image, put it in here. Then we select an image. It could just be another X in this case here. So you can see it then comes in here. I can drag it around. It doesn't conform to the other elements. In this case, I would just pull it down a wee bit in size, place it here, and you can then save it. So if this was a product of mine or a logo, a picture of me, it could be pretty much anything with a transparent background that you then have sticking out down here a little bit. It doesn't really impact your website as much as having a larger bar, but it's very eye-catching, so to speak.
It's a nice touch, and also it's possible for you to make it personal, like
very personal. Yeah, exactly. And again, it'll look, depending on your design on your website as well, you can make it look a lot more integrated into the website rather than a bar you've added on afterwards.
Great.
Now, as we said, you can hide the teaser here on desktop. On mobile, however, the teaser is mandatory. This is due to Google not allowing automatic pop-ups on mobile devices. So the user has to actually click the teaser on mobile in order for the form to spawn. Again, you stay on the right side of Google's guidelines, but we've also found that it actually is a much better user experience. Having something automatically pop up on a mobile device that takes up most or a large percentage of the screen is not conducive to a good user experience. So this way, the user has control over if they want to see it or not, or if they want to close it.
That's why you need a really compelling call to action on the teaser.
Exactly.
It's not just something you would click through and, let's just continue creating this leak box. No, it's quite important for you.
It's very important. And again, having an incentive on your Sleeknote really, can make or break it as well. If I were to simply have this Sleeknote say sign up to our newsletter and be the first to receive great news, I wouldn't expect a great conversion rate out of that. Users or people in general today have simply gotten so used to actually getting something in return for their email address. It doesn't necessarily have to be something monetary like a discount code or whatever, but having something to offer them and then use that as your CTA is by far the best way to go.
Nice.
Could be downloadables, pretty much whatever you can think of.
Let's continue to the success step.
Success step is the final one here in the editor. And as you can see here, it's pretty much just a small box where you get to say thank you to the customer for signing up. And in this case, offer a discount code. If you were to give them a downloadable, you could have the download button here with a link to where you posted it. If you're sending the customer anything, here you would as well write, that they have to keep an eye on their mailbox because you got double opt-in email coming, or their discount code or whatever it is should be there within a minute or two. And you can do that because of the integration options here. The lead will go directly into your list and onto your mail flow, and that email will then get sent out. It can be hidden, just like the teaser can. That's not something I would recommend, though. For this, it's simply not a good user experience to fill out a form, click sign me up. The form then disappears, but nothing else happens. You start to wonder if it goes through or not. But if you have your own landing page, you can have it redirect to that instead of showing the success step here. You can see it'll say that it's disabled, and I can then enter the URL of my landing page. That's just as valid as using the success step.
Just remember, if someone is on, let's say, a category page, it might not be that relevant to be redirected to another page that just confirms your sign up. So you're really need a good reason why you would do it.
Yeah, usually it would be because either they have to download something there, or you have an extended survey in order to segment the newsletter even further, something like that. The success step is a great way of giving that thank you without you interrupting their flow on the site.
So now I set up the Sleek box, and then
you've designed the node now here, and once you're happy with that, we click go to settings. And this is where you can get into the nitty-gritty of how you want to show your Sleeknote, who should see it, where on the site should it be shown. But first off, it of course needs a name. In this case, I can just call this one $30 off. This is only something that I'm able to see here in the editor. It's not something that the user sees on their end. But once you get 10, 15, 20, or 50 Sleek notes, having some way of actually sorting through them is very helpful. First up here, we got the rules engine. So if I click on change rules here, we start with the trigger. Now, by default, on a collect email address Sleeknote, we've set it to show after 7 seconds. 7 seconds is a great baseline for the user landing on the web page, not getting a lot of stuff thrown at them right away, but it's not so long that they will navigate away without getting to see it. It will, of course, depend on your audience, what's optimal here. If you have content or a store where that your users spend a larger amount of time on each product page, or you have long-form content, you could easily get away with having a longer trigger than this. But I would say if you don't know where to start, 7 seconds is by far the best baseline. You could also run with either a scroll or exit intent trigger. The scroll trigger, you simply define how far down the page in terms of percent you have to scroll in order for the node to spawn. Fantastic for, again, something like blog posts or other long-form content where you want to hit only the users who are actually interested in the content. That's, again, a type of node that you could run without the teaser on desktop as well if you don't want other users than the ones who actually scroll down to see it. Same goes for exit intent. Whenever someone's trying to leave your website, the node will then show. This is one where I'd say it's actually fairly important to disable the teaser on desktop. Let's say you're giving them an offer if they're trying to leave while mid-purchase in your checkout flow. That should, of course, not be something they could trigger manually before if they're just trying to complete the purchase regularly. Worth keeping in mind for all of these here is that they are only applicable on desktop and not mobile due to, again, Google's rule set. The final one we have here in the bottom, the manual trigger, requires a bit of work on your end as you get a piece of JavaScript that you can put on an element on your site. That means you could have a button that launches a Sleeknote, text, or an image. Pretty much anything the user can click, or if you're really creative with your code, you can use it on hover or a page load or anything else you can think of.
And then the smart triggers of
yeah,
course as well.
the smart trigger here is an algorithm that we've made that simply takes all of the work out of you having to test all these things yourself to figure out what works the best. How it does that is for 2 weeks, it runs the main 3 triggers here in different configurations. So it doesn't just test show after with 7 seconds, and it runs it with 5 and 10 and all sorts of other things as well. And the same with scroll and exit intent here. Once it has gathered data after these 2 weeks, it'll then adjust itself so that the trigger that has given the highest conversion rate will be the one it uses going forward in the majority of views. It'll still keep testing the other triggers every now and again just to see if the trend changes. If it does, if suddenly 7 seconds starts to convert better than 5, then it'll simply just change to the new trigger that performs best. So the longer you run it, the more data it has and the better it gets. But if you're planning to run a node that's going to be anything below 2 weeks, it really won't make sense, and you would essentially just be adding a random trigger then.
And the longer it goes, the better it will be. So
yeah,
if you really want to try this out, I would also recommend using this, since it will give you some more resources to do other stuff, because we'll effectively do some of the testing for you.
Yeah, it will do pretty much all the testing that's necessary in terms of triggers. So if you run this on one of your nodes, you can do A/B split testing on some of your other nodes and see, well, do we have to experiment with different button colors, or is some copy working better than others, or maybe a different offer? There are tons of things you can test, and this just takes at least this aspect out of it.
All right, that's the trigger. So I choose a trigger. Let's just go with the show after X seconds.
Yeah, we're going to stick with that one. That is by far, again, the one we see perform the best for newsletter generation. Conditions is then more of where should the node show and who should it show to, rather than how. So as you can see, by default, we've added the condition called newsletter subscriber and set it to don't show. So everyone who's already subscribed to your newsletter should not see this node. It's both a better user experience to not get asked to sign up to something that you're already signed up to, but it would also give you a lot better data that you don't have, let's say, 10,000 views to people who already subscribed, because they're not going to convert. So your conversion rate would essentially be much, much lower if you just showed it to everyone.
Exactly.
Now, how we filter this out is, of course, always the question, and we have to do it by cookies. Even if we had access to your email list by the integration, a user's email address is not something that appears in their browser as public information. That's probably a fairly good thing in terms of security, but it would make our lives a hell of a lot easier for something like this. But we place a cookie whenever someone subscribes that will then mark them as subscribed, and they won't see it the next time they come. You can place that yourself. We know not everyone starts their journey with us, so you might already have an existing list. If you go into here, you can see we have this query here called SN subscribed equals true. If you add that to your links in your newsletter, on the end of your UTM strings or whatever queries you might be running, then our script will simply place the cookie whenever someone comes to the site with this. So again, if you run it in your newsletters, then we know that everyone who clicks those links are already subscribed, and we will then mark them going forward. Now, the good thing about doing it with a cookie like this is that it is persistent, or as persistent as you can get in a browser. So once they've got that, it doesn't matter if they come to your site via Google or Facebook or Instagram or anything else. As long as it's in the same browser, they will still be tagged.
Let's see some of the other conditions, just a short description of some of the most important conditions.
Sure. By far, the two most used ones are specific URL and URL contains, as this determines where on your site you want the node to show. When we set it up in the beginning, we just defined the domain, and if we don't do anything else, then the Sleeknote will appear on the entire domain. But I could go into specific URL here and say, I only want to show this on our blog, for instance. So I go sleeknote.com/blog, press add URL. Now my node will only show on this one particular URL. Now, in our case, we have a lot of blog posts who are nested below the blog tag here. So instead of me having to add every single blog post manually, I can simply take the same URL here, put it in, add a star on the end of it, and it'll then take every URL that starts with this string and include it. Mm-hmm. Now, this can be done both as a show and a hide rule. So depending on how many pages you want to either show or hide on, either will make more sense. You could also go with the one here, as we said before, called URL contains. This looks for a keyword. So in my case, I could just write blog, and it would then take every URL with the word blog in it and show it on.
So if I was selling washing machines or something like that, I could make a sleek box for every washing machine out there and show it with just like including
you could use the word washing machine, but even further than that, you could run it on specific brand names. So again, go with washing machines. Are you running a campaign on Samsung washing machines? Well, then have it look for Samsung, and you can combine the different rules. So you could use both and say, well, it should look for the word Samsung, but it should only do it on the URL string that points towards your washing machine category, so you don't show that node on cell phones.
Yeah, for instance. Okay.
If we go down to the red ones here, they're a little more geared towards what you do on your site. So if you take specific cookie, if you have a login option on your site, for instance, you would typically place a cookie whenever someone's logged in. We can then look for that cookie and use that as a show or a hide rule. So you could show one Sleeknote to those who are logged in and another to those who aren't. In this case here, you would either look for the name on the cookie, which is cookie present. This could just be called logged in, for instance, if that was the name of my cookie. If the cookie is always there, so whether I'm logged in or not, but it has a value of yes or no, dependent on whether I'm logged in, you would use cookie matches. And then again, say, well, logged in equals yes, for instance. Then we look at both the name and the value.
What if I another condition I was thinking about, only to show to new visitors. Let's say I want to give a discount or something like that. I want to offer something different for new visitors versus those who are just returning to my site.
Sure. Then again, you could use the one here called new visitor. How we track that is, have they loaded a Sleeknote script before on your site? So again, of course, when you run it here, if you're an entirely new customer, then everyone would be counted as a new visitor because no one has seen a Sleeknote on your site before. But as you get into it, everyone who visits your site regularly will then just be sorted off, and it will only be entirely new visitors to the site.
Okay. Can I have as many conditions as I like? And can I have some that like these I want to show for and those I want to hide for?
Yeah, you can add as many as you want, and a hide rule will always trump a show rule if they're conflicting.
Yeah.
So again, for us, if we use the blog example, I could say I want to show this node on every page on our blog, but I could add a hide rule for one specific URL and say, well, except this one.
Okay.
Then that would trump the one that's show all. We do have two categories here. As you can see, this one up here called condition all of these apply. So if I add several different show rules here, then they all have to be met in order for the node to show. So it could be the customer is on this URL and has this cookie. But if I use one of these apply, then it would be the customer is either on this URL or has this cookie.
So another e-commerce example would maybe be that if you are, let's say you're coming from a campaign, you want people only to see a sleek box for someone that comes from a campaign, let's say on Facebook, paid advertising, and is on this landing page, then you want to show a message. But in the other case where it's one of these apply, then you don't care if they're just on the landing page or they just come from their campaign.
Exactly, yes. So you can do either. Good. If we jump out of the rules engine here, then we have the integration step. And this is where you get to set up the integration that pushes the lead directly to your ESP. Now, we have a few standard ones here. These are the most widely used. But if yours, for some reason, is not on the list here, you can either use something like Zapier as a middleman, or we can do custom integrations both with and without authentication, depending on how your system is set up. Now, for us, this is something that we will gladly help you do if you're not into yourself. The easiest way of going about that will usually just be to take a form from your existing ESP, and then we clone the request that's made there. But if we look at something like MailChimp, which, let's face it, a lot of people use here, all you would need would be your API key. Now, if I try to grab mine here, paste it in, you will then see it fetches a list of all the available lists that I have in MailChimp. In this case here, I can use my own test list. I'll then continue to the mapping step, and here I can then tell, well, the name that they enter in the Sleeknote should go into the first name field in MailChimp. The email field is automatically merged. That's because that's what they use as an identifier, so you can't move that anywhere else. But you do have the option of adding custom fields. So if you have a field in MailChimp for specific campaigns, I have one here, it's just called last name, but here I could then enter, again, the 30% off. If my MailChimp is then set up to register that if someone comes onto the list with this value in that field, it should send out a discount code or another automation, that will just happen by itself. You can also get data such as IP address or a sign-up page, if that's something you would need to document consent for signing up, or just, again, sign-up page out of interest to you, see where are the users actually engaging with this on my site, if you're running it on a lot of different pages. Welcome email and double opt-in is something that specifically MailChimp, but also other services run. This is not an email that we send out. This is just a command that we send to MailChimp telling it you need to send out a double opt-in email or a welcome email. So if you have it set up there, it will let me send out.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Let's go a little bit closer into, can we also as a company just save it with you guys? So let's say I have an e-commerce company. Again, I don't really use any of the ESP systems yet. I'm maybe in the process now of switching to Campaign Monitor or whatever from another service. Can I save all of my signups with you guys?
Yeah, of course. If you don't set up any integration here, we will simply keep the signups in our database. You can download a CSV file, import into whatever servers you then use. We do that even if you set up an integration. So let's say I have the integration with MailChimp, but one day MailChimp's API goes down or a link is broken somewhere, then I won't lose the leads that I get in that period. They will still be backed up on our server here. We keep them for a period of 3 months, after which they're then deleted, because our database doesn't get updated whenever someone unsubscribes or something. That only happens on your end. But again, for 3 months, you have full backup.
Nice.
Good. Goal tracking here, again, fantastic for something like e-commerce, where you want a quick way to see if someone who receives a discount code like the one we've set up here, if they actually make a purchase. So here I can enter a goal name, and again, I'll just call it purchase. And I have
you could say step 4, that's your receipt.
Yeah, my receipt stage. It could just be, called, checkout / and then as you say, step 4. So if someone ends up on that page, I know that they've made a purchase. I would then create this goal. And I will then, once the Sleeknote has been running and we get out into the dashboard, we'll be able to see how many % of those who actually signed up made a purchase with the code, but also how many of those who just saw the note actually ended up making a purchase. So we can see if getting the code actually made a difference. Hopefully it did. Yeah. Good. The advanced options here, I won't go too much into other than the one here called box order. If you have several Sleeknotes running in the same position on more than one page or on the same page, only one will be shown. It's, again, not a very good user experience to have several notes shown at the same time and on top of one another. So here you can define the priority of which the node should be shown. So let's say you have a newsletter generation Sleeknote here. But of course, once people have signed up to that, they won't see that anymore. So you have another node they should see instead. That way you could rank this one higher than the other one.
So the best example here would be if you just have a general one, like let's say a competition on your entire site, you have one general one. And then now I run a campaign with, let's say, those 30% off for the next week or whatever. I want to prioritize that first.
Yeah, so that way you simply just put a higher number in here. So if I say, well, I put 10 in here and my general one is set to 1, then this one would show ahead of the other one. Now, I like doing bigger jumps in the numbers here when I'm adding, instead of just doing 1 and 2, I would do 1 and 10, because that gives me the option of adding other nodes in between later on without me having to jigger around with all the existing ones. And there is no limit on what you can type here, so you could do 1, 100, and so on.
All right.
Good. Now, scheduling is the final feature that I'll cover here in the editor. When you set up a Sleeknote, you could, of course, simply press activate down here and it'll just be live when you press save, or you could leave it off, save it, then it's just disabled. You can go work on it later or activate it at a later date when you want to. But if you know you're going to be running a campaign for a specific set of days, it could be Black Friday or during Christmas or summer holiday or any given campaign time, you can go here, say add a schedule, fixed period. Simply pick a start date and time and an end date and time if you want one as well. You can also say, well, I don't want an end date. It should just start on this day and then run until I tell it something different. Fantastic, again, to take that load off you having to remember, well, I need to put this on. Or again, especially if we're talking Black Friday and you want to run from midnight to midnight, then you won't have to be up in those hours. But you could also run something like a repeating period and say, well, this should run every week, Monday, through Friday, or just one of the days from this hour to this hour. One of the best use cases for this we've seen so far is having a node that, say, if a user is idle on your site for a minute or two, you can have it pop up and say, well, if you're having trouble finding what you're looking for, give us a call. We're ready by the phones. And then, of course, you only have that node active during those hours where your customer service is actually on the job. So in this case, it could be from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. And then you could set up another Sleeknote to run the remaining part of the day that says, sorry, we're not here right now. Leave a message. We'll call you back tomorrow. And it'll then activate and deactivate itself every day. Or again, if you're running free shipping during the weekend, set it up once, let it take care of itself. So once you're all done with your design here, we press the save button. The Sleeknote will then be saved into our system here. In this case here, this is an entirely new trial. So it'll tell me that I need to implement this script here on my website in order for the Sleeknote to be called and work. The cool thing about this script here is that it doesn't link to this one particular Sleeknote, but it links to the account. So once I have this on the site once, then I never have to mess with the code again.
And I can use that chunk code on one site or multiple sites?
Again, it links to the account, so you would use this on every different site that you will be running Sleeknotes on from this Sleeknote account. This is why we have the domain question at the beginning of the editor, where we tell it, well, I want this one to run on sleeknote.com. If we had sleeknote.dk as well, for instance, then we could have different nodes running on both, but off the same script. So other than this one here, the only other piece of script you would ever need is if you're using the manual JavaScript trigger. All right. The script here can be implemented either directly into your HTML. You can use Google Tag Manager or WordPress plugin. It's really just up to you in terms of what you're comfortable with or what your developer has of options.
These days, it's normally an easy procedure.
Yeah, very. And again, Google Tag Manager is fantastic for something like this. Simply just put this into a single Google Tag Manager tag, tell it to run on all pages, and click publish, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say skip for now. We then end up here on the dashboard where we can see our node. Currently it's disabled. The name of it, where it runs, how many lead views it has gotten, what's the conversion rate, and this tracks over the entire lifetime of the node. And as you can see down here, the goal statistics, they're loading now because there isn't any data to show, but this would say, again, how many of those who have seen the Sleeknote actually made a purchase and how many of those who signed up made a purchase as well.
I think that's it. Let's end the webinar here.
Sure.
Thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions, Peter is always on the phone, nearly always.
On the phone or the chat.